Gary Klein saw his way to success? Is Jim Bitter a jerk? Or can Larry Nixon stage a tournament trail comeback? It's time for all the exciting action on the Bassmasters here on TNN Outdoors. Today, the $4 million Bassmaster Tournament Trail heads to Neely, Henry Lake at Gadsden, Alabama. And what a setting it is for this final leg of the 95-96 season of the nation's premier bass fishing organization.
What would you think about going to your favorite fishing hole in early May, only to find out the water temperatures in the low 80s? The Bassin textbook would say, for the most part, the spring fling is over. And you'd start looking for those migration routes away from the spawning beds as bass regroup for a few weeks before moving out to their summer haunts. On top of that, a fluctuating water level makes it virtually impossible to sight fish for bass, because what you can see today might be under 3 feet of stained water tomorrow. Well, today on the Bassmasters, we're going to rewrite the textbook with some tournament trail tactics that stretch conventional wisdom. One rule to keep in mind about bass fishing is there are no rules. Sometimes what should work doesn't. And in your own bass fishing, if you don't adjust, you may get left behind.
And Bob, that's what's going to unfold here in northern Alabama. It's been a colder than normal spring in the southeast, and lakes here have been slower to warm than usual. But high pressure and clear skies ahead of this tournament have Neely Henry's surface temperature jumping up the scale. You'd think these Bassmaster Top 100 pros would be thinking post-spawn, and they are. But there's one slight twist in the bass's behavior that may make the difference at the end of this 4-day competition.
And you'll find out what that little adjustment is right here on the Bassmasters. Plus, we have a great bass mailbag question on downsizing your tackle. And you'll meet our casting kid of the week, Eric Drake, a young angler from Montana who conquered his division in nationwide Zebco Rubbermaid Casting Kids program. So stay tuned. This is going to be a great lesson in making adjustments. I'm Bob Cobb. The Bassmasters will be right back with all the action right here on TNN Outdoors.
When the Bassmaster Tournament Trail pulled into Gadsden, Alabama in mid-May for this Top 100 Pro-Am tournament, most of the nation's best pros figured post-spawn. With Neely Henry's water temperatures pushing past the 80-degree mark, most bass are moving out of the spawning flats and coves. That's what Louisiana pro David Wharton is expecting.
I don't know, these fish may be changing a little bit. We're definitely heading into a post-spawn period, so fishing may change every day.
But some anglers are fishing shallow. Alton Jones is in a small canal in the back of a creek channel cove. Alton reported finding all his fish in pre-practice on the spawning beds.
We found this little canal the second day of practice, and there were fish on beds everywhere in here. And during practice, you could also just go along flipping these little bushes and overhangs, and you could get some bites. But during the tournament, I've only been able to catch them if I could see them. Patience is the key on these fish. If you know where a big one is, you need to just sit on them until they bite.
Jones is throwing a camo-colored Jawtech Wacky Craw, Texas rig, with a 3/16-ounce slip sinker. Sometimes he's even throwing the lure on the bank and dragging it into the water in front of the bass. This fish took over an hour to entice. Jones's partner, Larry Moorhead of Decatur, Illinois, also has a bass on. This Top 100 format offers members of the Bass Angler Sportsman Society a chance to compete in a separate amateur division, fishing in the boat with the nation's top bass pros. Amateurs compete for a fully rigged Ranger boat with an OMC outboard. Amateurs must fish from the back, and the pro runs the boat and picks all the fishing water. After the first round of competition, Alton Jones is locked in a tight race, just ounces behind Rick Lilligard and Jim Bitter. Only 3 pounds, 5 ounces separate the top 5 anglers. Tournament leader Jim Bitter is using his favorite lure of choice, a Smithwick Rogue jerkbait. Bitter has perfected the jerkbait to a technical science and is probably most deadly with the lure in a post-spawn situation. Here's how he works it.
Jerk, jerk, pause like I always do. Just a medium speed. A pull rather than a jerk. If you jerk it, it'll get real erratic and you don't get as many bites unless the fish are just going crazy, which they're not. you try to just make it swim fast in a straight line without it jumping off track. If it's jumping off track, then you're snapping it like this, and that's too hard. You do more of a pull instead of a snap. And everybody, including myself, when you get in a hurry, you start snapping it, and the thing starts, you're just overworking the bait is what you're doing, and you're not going to get as many bites.
Jim Bitter looks for a flat or shallow water adjacent to deep water. This is a typical place bass go after the spawn before moving out to deeper water. Bass put on the feed after the spawn to help get their strength back, and the jerkbait is especially good at triggering strikes.
Those spots are in here are feeding on shad, because every one we catch is spitting up a big shad, and I'm sure they're just chasing those shad, and this little jerkbait comes flying by, and that's just a reaction. There's one. There's a good one. I got mama. Get down, baby. Coming over it. Get around her. Watch your hands. All right, all right. There's a hero.
New Hampshire pro Rick Lilligard is tied with Bitter after the first round. Like David Wharton, Lilligard is concentrating on stumps near deep water in the middle of major spawning coves. But this second morning, he couldn't resist a little early topwater action.
This lake gets quite a bit of pressure. I think we're going to have to back off and fish the middle of these coves. I know there's a lot of stumps out in the middle of this cove here. I may go in the afternoon, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to drag that Carolina rig a little more. I haven't been planning on too much of a topwater bite. I'm just taking advantage of this morning. And my buddy here, he just had a real good fish roll up on his topwater, so I'm going to do it until the sun gets high, and then I'm probably just going to throw that Carolina rig all day because I know there's a lot of stumps all out in the middle of this cove. And that's 3. That gives me about a pound now.
After the sun is up, Rick Lilligard switches back to his stump pattern.
Big old stump over there. What I've been doing, there's a row of stumps in the river here that's just about a cast length out from the boat. And I haven't been fishing the shore too much, but I've been throwing up onto the shore, catching some fish, but a lot of the fish have been coming, throwing parallel to the bank about a boat's length out, which is where most of the stumps are. There's some fish spawning, there's some fish that already have spawned, and I have caught a few that haven't spawned yet, so the water's getting real warm. Some of those fish that some people found on beds weren't around anymore, so they're leaving real quick, facing mostly a post-spawn situation. I'm going to drag this Carolina rig around a lot today in pretty shallow water. They seem to be relating to some of the stumps and stuff. There's some fish protecting fry. There's a lot of fish swimming around, but I've been fishing mostly in about 2 feet of water, trying to concentrate on stumps.
Coming up next, we'll meet a hot, young tournament trail pro who's heading into an area other contestants overlook.
Good Lord, watch this. Ready? Watch it, people.
Now, let's join Weighmaster Ray Scott for the second day weigh-in.
Largest creel of the tournament. Watch it. 23 pounds, 14 ounces. There you are. That's King of the Hill, Clark Wendland.
That rockets Clark Wendland to the top of the leaderboard. Now, yesterday's leader, Jim Bitter.
People, he is going to, I believe, retain the lead. Nope. Fine. I don't have enough weight. Man, don't tell me you don't. Watch what happens. 13 pounds, 2 ounces. Mark it. Now,
sorry, Ray, but Jim was right. He drops to second. Watch out for the hot young pro from South Carolina, Davey Hike.
Just to move him up to 3rd to 4th place. 15 pounds, 5 ounces. Let's give him a nice hand, people. That's remarkable.
So here's how it shakes out after 2 days of the Bassmaster Alabama Top 100. Clark Wendland takes a 3-pound, 5-ounce lead over Jim Bitter. Davey Hike moves up to 3rd. Bernie Schultz and Gary Klein round out the top 5. Yesterday's co-leader, Rick Lilligard, brings in a small limit today and drops to 10th. The 3rd round. And you can count on more leaderboard turmoil today as these fickle post-spawn bass keep moving and changing. Tournament leader Clark Wendland is pitching a Texas-rigged plastic lizard along a 1-mile stretch of bank up the Coosa River arm. But he's in gridlock with the bass today. Clark is fishless at noon. Across the river, Weatherford, Texas pro Gary Klein is catching bass. Let's join Bassmaster field reporter Tim Miller alongside Klein.
Gary Klein is good at so many things, and that's why he's so consistent on the Bassmaster Tournament Trail. But one thing he does especially well is find and pattern bass through different seasons of the year. And that's why he can go to any body of water all over the country, just about any time of the season, and find and catch fish. And he's applying that knowledge here in this post-spawn condition.
What I'm actually keen on is, again, you know, I got a little bit of flow of current in the upper section of the lake here. And up and down this river, there's a lot of back pockets, little back creeks and bays. And most of these fish are finished spawning, and they're all migrating back out in the main river channel. And the fish that I've been catching are long and skinny, mostly post-spawn fish. And really, there's no rhyme or reason except for the current will position the fish. So the stronger the current flow that I have, the easier it is to position the fish up and down the banks. Probably the most important thing about this certain section of the river that I'm fishing is that you have the back creeks. Once you get about a mile above the bridge, you lose all the backwater. There is no other backwater headed up. So here you have more, I think, of a concentration of fish that are moving back out into this section of the river. But what I'm really trying to do on this particular lake, I'm trying to put myself where I feel I'm in the area that has the greatest population of fish. And anytime I can fish around a lot of backwaters, I know that the fish have already moved back there to spawn, and now I'm fishing where they're moving back out too.
Jig and pig, jig and craw, or plastic lizard? It's a question a lot of us face this time of year as temperatures start to warm. Here's why Gary Klein's using a plastic lizard.
Well, we have real warm water temperatures. Up in the day, a lot of this water up here is 82, 83 degrees, and I've never had that great a success when the water is real warm fishing a jig. But I still want a bulky bait, so I'm using a lizard, which I think will catch both post-spawn fish and pre-spawn fish. Like that last fish that I caught back up there, the fish actually ate me as I was swimming the lizard back off the target. She came up and got it.
Fishing the lake's midsection is another veteran pro who's making a tournament trail comeback. For the past 2 seasons, all-time BASS money winner Larry Nixon has been absent from the top of the leaderboard. Like Klein, Nixon is following the seasonal pattern.
It's just typical May pattern on most lakes. These fish here, they just brought the lake up to summer pool the 1st of May, and the fish are going to stay shallow. Some are spawning. I think most of them spawn. Well, I really don't know. I've caught some that I swear haven't spawned. And all I'm doing is just fishing a lot of water close to spawning grounds, flat water basically. Fish aren't real aggressive. The only way I can catch them is on a lizard or a worm, one or the other.
Another pro to keep your eye on is Davey Height from Prosperity, South Carolina. Height is fishing a secluded cove in the Canoe Creek arm of Neely Henry, only accessible through this culvert drain. Height's casting a V&M lizard and a floating worm at spawning bass.
When I'm flipping the lizard, the bites are real subtle. Usually on the fall, just a real light tick, and you have to really watch your line real close. So I'm really taking my time and with each flip and watching the line and watching the lizard as it falls to the bottom. That's when the bites have been occurring.
And with 5 keeper bass in the live well, like this one, Height's sure to move up.
Hey, folks, watch this man. I think he got a potential winner here before this week's out. 14 pounds and 8 ounces. That was a good start.
Players are lining up for the final round of shootout in the Bassmaster Alabama Top 100. Gary Klein brings in 14 pounds 3 ounces to land second. Bernie Schultz jumps to third with an 11-pound 11-ounce limit. And 4-time Bassmasters Classic winner Rick Clunn, with the day's biggest catch of 19 pounds 9 ounces, charges into fourth. Yesterday's leader, Clark Wendland, drops to fifth. We'll be back with final round action, including a great tip on how you can locate secluded areas often overlooked by other fishermen. But first, it's time for Bass Mail, where you send in questions for the pros. Jim Campbell of Quincy, Illinois asks Florida pro Bernie Schultz, give me some tips on downsizing my bait casting equipment for lighter tackle.
I do use different rods for different size lures. If I'm throwing a big spinnerbait like this 3/4 ounce model, I'm usually using a 6.5 to 7 foot medium heavy action rod. It's a graphite rod and it's very powerful. On the other hand, if I'm throwing a smaller spinnerbait like this little 1/4 ounce or maybe a 3/8 ounce model, I'm using a shorter rod. It's still a medium heavy action, but it's shorter for accuracy. I can put the lure where I need to, especially if it's in a tight situation. The same holds true for crankbaits. If I'm throwing a big crankbait like this, obviously I'm going to need a longer rod. It gives me more distance and more control with the lure. If I'm throwing a small little crankbait like this, I'm going to use a shorter rod that's a little more forgiving and lighter in action. It's got a very forgiving tip, and that's for 2 reasons. Castability. I'm still fairly accurate with the rod. It helps me to cast this little lure a little bit further, and it's also really good when you get a fish on these tiny treble hooks. Too often the fish tear off, and if you've got a heavy action rod, that's going to really complicate things. So keep your tackle proportionate. It's really important that the rod, the line, and the lure all be within the same range.
Send your Bassin questions to Bass Mail, P.O. Box 140430, Dallas, Texas, 75214. Here's a Bassin contrast for you. Rick Clunn, 23-year veteran of the Bassmaster Tournament Trail. Davey Height, fishing his 3rd year as a pro. Both are in Canoe Creek this last day, both starting with topwaters. Only one can win. But there's another contrast about Height's area.
Not really the best area on the lake in my opinion, but I've gone into it. It's not getting pressured. There's not very much backwater on this lake, and I've just found an area that not many people are in, maybe because it's not supposedly a very good area, and I'm just trying to catch a few fish that are in there.
With a cloudy sky today, Davey's throwing a buzz bait along a subtle 1 to 2 foot channel feeding this backwater flat. So how can you apply this go-it-alone strategy in your own fishing?
On heavy pressured lakes, you might want to try areas that are just not being fished or not known locally for being good areas. I think the key to me being able to catch fish each day is because I'm in an isolated area. There's only been one other boat in here with me. It's not a very popular place. I caught fish here when I came here and pre-fished, and I asked a few people that are good fishermen here just about the area, just questioning them, and they said that nobody fishes it, it wasn't really good. And every time I came in here, the water was even lower then. I knew more fish would move in after the water came up. And every time I came in here, I caught some quality fish. And I've had the bites today that if I don't win, I've had the bites to win.
Davey Height knows the late spring warm-up delayed the spawn, so he didn't stay locked on one pattern. By rotating between post-spawn bass early and spawning bass the rest of the day, he's put together an impressive 20 bass creel over the last 4 rounds. Montgomery, Texas pro Rick Clunn is throwing a pop-R against a riprap along the Permita Creek Bridge. But Clunn's fish are small today, and the bigger bass that were here yesterday are gone. One thing veteran Clunn knows, bass are unpredictable. So Davey Height captures his 2nd Bassmaster Tournament Trail title.
Puts him in the lead, people. Let's give him a good hand. How about it, 18? There you are. Hey, I think you won this tournament.
In the amateur division, Reverend Jim Phillips of Mississippi takes the title with a 4-day catch of 31 pounds, 2 ounces. Now it's time for the Pros Pointer, the how-to section of the Bassmasters. Brought to you by Wrangler Ruggedwear, geared for the outdoors.
I fish a floating worm a lot in this tournament, and I use a barrel swivel in front of my floating worm to add a little bit of weight. The fish didn't seem to want to come all the way to the surface to bite the floating worm, so I just use this barrel swivel in front of it for a little added extra weight. And with the hook, I run the hook straight through the worm and then bring it out, exposed, and give the worm a slight twist to give a crook in the worm, and it gives the worm a lot of action. I leave it exposed because I wasn't throwing in any thick cover, and you're sure to catch the fish when they bite with the hook exposed. You don't have to worry about missing any fish at all. This is how I work the rod when I'm fishing a floating worm. Just 2 to 3 short twitches with your rod tip, and pause. Watching your line real close because I was fishing the floating worm out of sight most of the time, and you had to watch your line, real close because if a fish bites and you give it a twitch, the fish will feel you and spit the bait out. 3 times a year I use a floating worm. It's pre-spawn, spawn, and in the fall. If you'll add it to your arsenal, you'll win a lot more tournaments and it'll help you catch a lot more fish.
Next week, the Bassmasters head up north to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and Lake Minnetonka. This is one of bass fishing's best-kept secrets. There's lots of grass, lots of bass, and lots of action, and we're only 20 minutes from downtown Minneapolis. For the Bassmasters, I'm Bob Cobb. Join us right here next week for all the action on TNN Outdoors.
The Bassmasters has been brought to you by Ranger Boats, still building legends one at a time. Berkeley Power Bait, fish bite and won't let go. Bass Pro Shops, world's largest supplier of premium tackle. Chevy Trucks, the most dependable, longest-lasting trucks on the road. Jersey's Activewear, the official licensed knit apparel of the Bass Angler Sportsman Society. Evinrude Outboards, leading the way. Storm Lures, quality lures for taking the big ones by storm. Lowrance, setting the course in marine electronics. Zebco Quantum, the top names in fishing. Wrangler Rugged.